Today, millions see New York as polished and safe. But not long ago, survival meant dodging 1,691 murders a year, walking past mountains of trash, and watching entire neighborhoods disappear in smoke. The city was nearly $10 billion in debt, labeled Fear City by its own police, and the South Bronx alone suffered up to 130,000 fires each year. How did ordinary people endure life inside a world-famous city unraveling before their eyes? And what did that chaos create? Factories once powered New York's economy, but by the early 1970s, the assembly lines in Brooklyn and the docks along the Hudson had gone quiet. Hundreds of thousands of jobs vanished as shipping and manufacturing companies packed up for cheaper labor and bigger spaces outside the city. Middle-class families, many of them white, followed the jobs to the suburbs, taking their tax dollars with them. The city's tax base shrank, but the bills kept coming. To keep schools open and garbage trucks rolling, City Hall borrowed more and more, until the debt soared to nearly $10 billion by the middle of the decade. Payrolls were paid with borrowed money. Parks, streetlights, and playgrounds fell into disrepair as budgets were slashed. In October 1975, President Gerald Ford refused a federal bailout, and the Daily News headline, "Ford to City, Drop Dead," captured the feeling of abandonment. For city workers, it meant layoffs and impossible choices. As one former municipal employee put it, "We were told to do twice the work with half the people. There was never enough." On a summer night in 1972, the city recorded 1,691 murders, more than 4 people killed every single day. The streets buzzed with stories of muggings, shootings, and assaults. Fear seeped into daily routines. A commuter riding the subway after dark would step into a car layered with graffiti, lights flickering, faces turned away. Passengers gathered in the center, close together, eyes darting to the doors at every stop. Parents warned their children to avoid certain corners and to walk home in groups, never alone. Some people carried a few dollars in a separate pocket, called mugger money, hoping it would be enough to avoid trouble if stopped. In 1975, police unions handed out the Fear City pamphlet, a black-bordered warning for tourists, telling them to avoid the subways, stay off the streets at night, and never go out alone. The message was clear. Danger was everywhere, and even the police said so. For millions, fear became a background hum, shaping every step, every decision, every night spent listening for sirens in the distance. In the South Bronx, fire became a constant presence, so common that some nights the sky glowed orange and the air was thick with smoke. By the mid-1970s, the borough was seeing up to 130,000 fires a year, an average of nearly 30 fires every 2 hours. Entire blocks vanished, reduced to rows of blackened shells and empty lots. A retired firefighter remembered that they would put out a blaze on one street, only to get called to another 3 blocks away. They never caught up. Landlords, unable to make a profit and facing rising costs, sometimes walked away from their buildings or, in the worst cases, paid to have them burned for the insurance. With city budgets collapsing, firehouses were shuttered or moved out of the neighborhoods that needed them most. Response times stretched, and fires that once might have been contained now raged out of control. Residents described living with the fear that their own building could be next. The phrase, "the Bronx is burning," started as a headline, but for people who lived there, it was the truth. Night after night, block after block, their world was literally going up in flames. On July 13, 1977, New York City was swallowed by darkness. A lightning strike knocked out the grid, and within minutes, the city's hum turned into chaos. In the blackout's first hours, a store owner on Brooklyn's Broadway Avenue watched crowds smash windows and pour inside, grabbing whatever they could carry. He stood helpless, hearing the sound of breaking glass echo up and down the block. Over the next 25 hours, nearly 1,600 stores were looted or damaged. Fires broke out everywhere, more than 1,000 in a single night, lighting the sky orange as firefighters raced from one emergency to the next, unable to keep up. Police arrested about 3,700 people, their holding cells overflowing. The damage reached $300 million, but for many the real loss was a sense of order. With the lights out, all the anger and frustration that had built up during years of neglect and poverty spilled onto the streets. For a moment, it felt like the city had finally reached its breaking point. Locked doors became the first line of defense. In apartment buildings from Harlem to the Lower East Side, families added extra deadbolts, chains, and sometimes even baseball bats behind the door. Carrying mugger money, a few loose bills meant to hand over in a stick-up, became as routine as grabbing your keys. On the street, people walked fast, keys threaded between their fingers, eyes scanning for trouble. The subway demanded its own kind of vigilance. Riders picked the safest-looking car, stayed away from empty sections, and kept their backs to the wall. Times Square at night was a gauntlet of neon and vice, but for some it was just the route home, navigated with practiced speed and a careful sense of which corners to avoid. Shopkeepers swept their sidewalks, watched out for neighborhood kids, and sometimes offered a safe haven behind the counter if things got rough. Grandmothers kept watch from upstairs windows, ready to shout a warning if something seemed off. In the face of chaos, survival meant looking out for each other. Neighbors formed quiet alliances, shared tips, and refused to let fear win. A battered city became a laboratory for invention. In the South Bronx, DJ Kool Herc lugged his speakers out to local parks and community rooms, stringing together the best parts of funk records, those hard-hitting drum breaks, so the dancing never had to stop. With 2 turntables and a mixer, he created something new, hip-hop. Kids who had nowhere else to go turned these block parties into safe zones, where MCs rhymed over the beat and breakdancers carved out space on cardboard mats. Downtown, a different kind of rebellion took root at a dive bar called CBGB. Bands like the Ramones and Television played 3 sets a night for a few bucks, their sound raw and urgent, shaped by the chaos outside. The club's tiny stage became a launch pad for punk and new wave, fueled by cheap rent and a do-it-yourself attitude. Meanwhile, the city's subways turned into rolling galleries. Young graffiti writers risked arrest to tag their names or cover entire train cars with bright, elaborate pieces. The more daring the art, the higher the status. Out of scarcity and neglect, a global culture was born, one that made the world look twice at New York, not for its shine, but for its grit and imagination. By the late 1970s, city leaders and business owners started searching for ways to pull New York back from the edge. In 1975, the state created the Municipal Assistance Corporation, called MAC, to oversee city finances and enforce strict budget controls. Real estate developers were offered new incentives to renovate buildings and invest in neglected neighborhoods, sparking the first signs of physical recovery. In 1977, a simple logo saying, "I love New York" began appearing on billboards and souvenirs as part of a campaign to attract tourists and restore the city's battered image. The message was everywhere. New York was still worth loving, still worth saving. These early steps did not erase the scars of the decade, but they showed that the city was ready to fight for its future, not just survive its present. A walk through today's Soho or the Lower East Side reveals a city transformed, where artists once squatted in abandoned factories, high-end galleries and busy cafes now fill the same spaces. The South Bronx, once defined by burned-out shells and empty lots, has become a destination for hip-hop fans from across the globe, tracing the roots of a movement that began with block parties and breakbeats. The rhythms that started on battered turntables now echo worldwide, and punk's raw energy, born in downtown clubs, still shapes music and fashion far beyond New York. Yet, beneath the polished storefronts and rising rents, the memory of hardship lingers. The city's reputation for resilience, for turning crisis into creativity, is not just nostalgia, it is the foundation of what New York means to the world. Survival here was never just about getting by, it was about reinventing what was possible, again and again. New York's resilience was forged in fire and crisis, not comfort. Today, as the city faces new pressures, rising rents, inequality, and climate threats, that legacy matters. The lesson endures. Reinvention is survival. The city's grit is not nostalgia. It is a blueprint for facing whatever comes next. Share your thoughts below.